So the Supreme Court today is going to be hearing a case that's going to affect each and every one of us potentially. What is going on is the Biden administration has recently mandated that every single American has to be vaccinated against the virus that's going around. I'm hesitant to mention the actual name of the virus because YouTube and other entities are cracking down on anything to do with the quote-unquote virus, so that's what I'm going to refer to it as. And my focus today is not so much on the politics of exactly what's going on or what's right and what's wrong necessarily. My focus is the legal aspect of it, and I want to explain a few things to you pertaining to this quote-unquote mandate and exactly how the process works. Hello and welcome. I am J.R. Dukes, your host of the J.R. Dukes Show. I appreciate you joining me today. What we're talking about is the Biden administration's mandate. The way to explain it is that essentially the Biden administration has used OSHA, which is a federal, basically it's just an institution of the federal government, and they're saying, hey, all employers that are a certain size, you have to have all of your employees essentially vaccinated. Question is that constitutional? We all enjoy our freedoms. We all like to be free. Nobody likes to be told what to do or what not to do. When we're told to do something, generally it's human nature that we react the opposite way. So, my opinion, this is probably not the best way to go about this, but it is what it is. They have instructed OSHA that you shall require the employers to have their employees vaccinated. And of course, there's been several lawsuits filed pertaining to this, and now they have worked their way up to the U.S. Supreme Court. Specifically, two different cases actually got merged together. There may have been more than two, but the bottom line is we're here today for oral argument in front of the U.S. Supreme Court. We need a Supreme Court. We need a court to decide issues in our lives because it may seem clear-cut in a lot of ways, but essentially what the court tries to do is balance the needs, balance our rights, balance what's best for society and what is best for our freedom-loving society. I like to think of it like this, and I had an attorney explain it to me this way years ago. Basically, it's like a tire on the road where the rubber meets the road is probably the best way to say it. The tire, for example, might be our freedoms, and the road in this example might be a mandated vaccine through the federal government. Well, there's got to be some way to balance it, some way to say, hey, this takes spot number one, this takes spot number two. And of course, in our country, if you don't know, we have three co-equal branches of government. We have the executive branch, which is essentially the president. You have the legislative branch, which is your Congress, and then the judicial branch, which is the U.S. Supreme Court and the other courts associated with it. Basically, you have the president mandating through OSHA these particular rules, and you have citizens and businesses saying, hey, this is not right, this violates the Constitution. So here we are today to hear the arguments in front of the U.S. Supreme Court pertaining to whether or not this is a violation of our rights under the U.S. Constitution. Now, in looking at this particular case, the courts generally use what is called basically they look at prior cases, what we call precedent. And one of the main cases that they've been using to essentially say that vaccines is something that can be authorized by the federal government is a case that dates all the way back from 1905. It's called Jacobson versus Massachusetts. And in this particular case, basically a guy that was a pastor, he did not want to be vaccinated. And he went ahead, he was a Cambridge pastor, Henning Johnson. He immigrated to our country from Sweden, and essentially the federal government, or in this particular case, it was the state of Massachusetts, that wanted him to be vaccinated against smallpox, and he just did not want to be vaccinated. And he has his reasoning for that. A lot of it is similar to the issues of today and the reasons people issue today for not wanting to be vaccinated. But at any rate, the meat of this situation is as follows. The Supreme Court, in a split decision, I believe it was 7-2 at the time it was a 7-2 majority decision that basically said that this individual had to be vaccinated, and it was constitutional for the state municipality to authorize and to mandate that the vaccination had to take place. This is what it says, and the court held, quote, in every well-ordered society charged with the duty of conserving the safety of its members and the rights of the individual in respect of his liberty may at times, under pressure of great dangers, don't forget that, pressure of great dangers, be subjected to restraint, to be enforced by reasonable regulations, as the safety of the general public may demand. It goes on to say that real liberty for all could not exist under the operation of a principle which recognizes the right of each individual person to use his own liberty, whether in respect of his person or his property, regardless of the injury that may be done to others. So basically what the court is saying, that under extreme situations where the better good of society demands vaccinations, and of course we were talking about smallpox at this particular time, the court said it is definitely constitutional. I really like the second part here of the reasoning. Basically what they're saying is that liberty could not exist, and we couldn't have a society if we said, hey, we have a right to basically cause other people to die, other people to become sick, other people to have issues that they would not otherwise have if we would become vaccinated. Now, obviously, there needs to be some kind of balance, and that's the duty of the U.S. Supreme Court and the courts in general. In other words, where does this begin and where does it end? In other words, can the federal government require us all to get a flu vaccine each and every year? Because if you look at it in the strictest sense, if you fail to get the flu shot in a particular year, you could theoretically spread the flu to someone, and that could result in their death. So obviously there has to be a balance. There has to be a way to say that here's the tire and here's the road, and here's how we're gonna split it up, and how we're gonna determine what is just and what is not just. I like the way that I believe it was Justice Thurgood Marshall years ago said. He said that the Constitution is not a suicide pact. And I like that. And in other words, in this particular type situation, you could not walk around, for example, with Ebola and the entire population die as a result of your failure to contain your own disease or to protect yourself from the disease. Now, obviously, the current situation that's going on today with the virus is not as serious or as much of a problem as, say, Ebola would be if it could be transmitted in the same capacity. But there has to be some way for the court to work through this and figure it out, and that's what they're going to try to do today. So we'll just have to stay tuned and see how it works out. I will say that most news networks that are liberal, a little more left-leaning, more progressive, if you will, they believe firmly that the mandates are going to be upheld, and some of the more conservative news outlets think it's going to be dismissed. It's going to be interesting to see exactly how this does pan out. I don't really want to make a prediction because it's really going to be it's going to be tough to really read the tea leaves, but we'll see exactly what happens on this. The takeaway today, folks, is I want you to understand how our system works as far as working its way up to the Constitution and why a case like this is important. It affects each and every one of our liberties. It affects our ability to essentially live our daily lives. No one wants to be told what to do, and one of the great things about living here in our country is we are free. We are free to do essentially whatever we want to do, but you have to remember this. Our rights end generally where someone else's rights begin. And sometimes it's not as black and white as that. And thank God we have a U.S. Supreme Court that can try to work through these issues with us. I know they don't always get it right, but it is our system of justice, and we'll see how it turns out. At any rate, I appreciate you joining me today. I want you to always remember to have that free mind and never give up. I am J.R. Dukes.